All right, let's talk a little bit about coaches that are under pressure. Alluded to this in the intro, but every coach in college football is under some kind of pressure. Some of that's to keep their job. Some of that is to get back to former glory. Maybe we'll start there. Some of that is to just take that next step. Some of that is to get out of the can't win the big game. Like every coach is under pressure. Let's start in Clemson, South Carolina. Does it feel to you guys like Dabo is starting to adjust, starting to change things? They're on an incredible hot streak recruiting where they just picked up, I think, 4 blue chip guys, 1 3-star that has offers from like Oregon and Auburn and everybody else that's great too, right? Like, so they've done a really good job this last week. They're recruiting. They've got a top 5 class right now, according to both sites. We're a long way from December signing day, so we'll see how that kind of pans out. They should have a pretty decent season. I think the schedule lines up fairly well for them this year too. Is the pressure that Dabo's under, like, what does that look like, and what do you kind of expect out of him and that program?
He's made changes. I mean, we got to give him credit where credit's due. This is a guy that was set in his ways forever, and then he says, all right, let's go make an outside hire. Let's bring in Garrett Riley from TCU. All right, let's give it a defensive coordinator. Let's bring in Tom Allen from Penn State. Sorry, Tom, they had to steal him from you guys, but still, right. You bring him on in, and you're saying, okay, well, and nobody's ever asked Dabo to go and spend ample money the way that Ole Miss or South Carolina or Missouri does in the transfer portal. Just don't be so set in your ways that if they don't pick you first, they're not worthy of donning that orange and purple color with that paw on the side of the helmet. That should never be the case. This is a team that's built to win multiple college football playoff games this year. I love what they have in Kate Klubnik. I love what they have with a better defensive front. I love what they have with guys who are going to have more reps underneath their belt. Their wide receivers, for the first time probably in 5 years, feel like they belong at wide receiver U with Bryant Wesco and TJ Moore and Antonio Williams. They landed a 4-star running back who has been turning heads so far throughout the early stages of training camp. And they're recruiting well. Now, again, they have to retain as many of these recruits as possible from what is March all the way until December, but they're building an identity. My question is that what is going to be the new norm for a Dabo Swinney and for a Clemson team? Is it guaranteeing that they go to the college football playoff and then they're a first-round exit? Are fans okay with that after winning national titles? Is it that we're going to still be the pedigree and the face of the college football playoffs? Of the ACC. We're still ahead of Miami. We're still ahead of Florida State. We're still ahead of any breakout team. That's really where the question comes to. And I think that fans are ultimately going to determine how much pressure Dabo's under. Like if they go 8-4 this year with how much returning talent they have on offense, that's going to turn up the heat just a little bit more, especially with how many players that you were able to land and finally make some changes in the portal. But this isn't one of those years where I feel like if Dabo doesn't win it all, it's not like, okay, well, next year it's time or bust. I want to continue to see him make those necessary changes. And he's done that part. So I want to give him credit where credit's due. The dude has been able to at least stabilize what has been an aging past for dinosaurs. And I want to give Tyler and Spartanburg a lot of credit. Without him pushing the buttons out on that radio show, who knows what we would be seeing right now. He is the reason why Clemson is on its way back.
I'll second the Tyler and Spartanburg, Tom.
Yeah, Clemson, it feels like you either win the ACC championship or you're in trouble. Now, I really don't think Dabo's on the hot seat by any means. And that's the challenge of this argument is like, all right, what does pressure look like? And TJ, you hit on that earlier. So I think the expectation for Clemson is you win the ACC championship, period. And time is a factor. And then I think inevitably at some point, Florida State financially will get its act together and put something that looks like a competitive football team on the field this year. I doubt it, but like sometime soon, Bill Belichick and UNC, how long is that project going to last?
1 year.
SMU money will live on forever. That's something we can all feel pretty confident in. Looking around college football, again, I'll point to my own team, but James Franklin, I don't think he's on the hot seat. But it is win the college football national championship this year or bust. Again, I don't think he's going to get fired. I've been misquoted on this show before in respect to that. I don't think he's going to get fired, but the pressure is you lose Drew Aller, Katron Allen, Nick Singleton, Denai Dennis Sutton, Zane Durant, Akee Wheatley, et cetera, after this year, potentially most of your offensive line. It's all in for Penn State in 2025 to win the national title. Coach pressure, hot seat. Brent Venables, we talked about him before. If this isn't a significantly better year for OU, I expect him to be fired. Looking around college football, I think Sharon Moore should justifiably be under pressure. Is he going to get fired? No, I don't think so. But you just got this major flip, this potentially generational talent at quarterback in Underwood, as Bryce Underwood start immediately, to the point that Cole was saying before. Do you get a little bit of Mikey Keene, the transfer from Fresno State, there for a little bit? Michigan has got a rebound. I think there's a bunch of teams out there that you can look at as like, all right, there's pressure on Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame to get back to right where they were. And it's like, okay, 2 transfer quarterbacks right in a row. You got all the way to the national championship, and it was a tough outing. I think Steve Sarkisian, there's pressure at Texas for him to make the Arch Manning potential real. Again, not the hot seat, but certainly pressure. Kirby Smart, Gunnar Stockton, does that work out? Miami, second transfer quarterback in a row, Carson Beck. I think the pressure is on Mario Cristobal to start delivering there at Miami in a much bigger way. They have to make the playoff. I think the most pressure-packed job right now is Kalen DeBoer. It was since he took the job in Tuscaloosa.
Oh, God.
He's not going to, he could get fired if they absolutely lose their minds in Alabama. I don't think they will, but I think the pressure on him at Alabama, and Cole, you tell me this, make the playoff or we're going to lose our minds.
Yeah, make the playoff or you'll lose your mind because of now you have your quarterback. But anybody who's like, and there's people out there that just love to get the clicks, and I understand it's a business. You want to get as many people tuned in as possible. But saying the man is on the hot seat after replacing the GOAT and still finishing one spot outside of the college football playoff rankings is an asinine take. And it just shows that you're going for the clicks and you don't really care about college football.
I legitimately don't think he is on the hot seat. I think they could absolutely lose their minds and potentially fire him, which would be silly. And I just genuinely don't think that's going to happen. But he is certainly under pressure to make things significantly better at Alabama. So to me, for the Crimson Tide, it's make the playoff or bust.
What about Brian Kelly, Cole?
That's a great one.
They had the best offense that we'd seen since really probably LSU's last national title a couple of years ago, and really just couldn't do anything with it. This year, not necessarily any easier. We talked about Dabo. They're going to start in Clemson this year, and they've lost 5 in a row to open the season. They have Clemson the next 2 years to open the year, this time in the Clemson version of Death Valley, next year in the Baton Rouge version of Death Valley. If they lose that one and they still have Alabama on the schedule, they still obviously have a very tough road with Ole Miss and other teams that, they've got to play Florida, who beat them last year. Now I think you're probably looking at LSU saying they're probably worst case. There's an absolute, wheels come off the bus type scenario where they don't, but probably looking at 8-4, but is 8-4 good enough for them again this year with the resources and the expectations in Baton Rouge? What kind of pressure is he under?
TJ, 8-4 is never good in Baton Rouge, ever. It doesn't matter if it's Brian Kelly or if it's Ed Orgeron. That's not a good season for the folks out in Baton Rouge because if they have tasted victory, they have been to the promised land, they have been able to win a college football playoff and a BCS national title with 3 different coaches, and they spent a bucket load of money to get the all-time winningest coach from South Bend, Indiana, strike while the iron was hot and bring him on in. And he wasn't able to do anything because if he didn't decide to clean house with the defense when he had the number 1 offense. They have an explosive offense this year with Garrett Nussmeier back in. I will defend him. He is QB2 for my liking in college football. Get over it, Tom. Drew Aller's like QB7. It's nowhere in the conversation.
7? Oh.
He's so low for me. But you have a solid wide receiver core. You spent money in the transfer portal to build your defense up, an area that showed promise at times last year. And you are welcoming Florida to your backyard. You're welcoming South Carolina to your backyard. You're welcoming in Ole Miss. Ole Miss is not the same team that you saw last year. Clemson, it's the ACC. The ACC has lost to the SEC more often than not. Clemson, Dabo Swinney loses to SEC teams to open up the year. And that can't be the new norm for you. So there's pressure for him. But there's more pressure, in my opinion, on Brent Venables and Hugh Freeze because BV got a brand new contract when nobody was going after him. And now there's an opportunity for Joe Castiglione to kind of wave the white flag and say, we got to hit reset. And when you look at Auburn last year, Auburn was not a bad football team. Auburn was just masqueraded as a bad football team because of turnovers. And part of the reason they had turnovers, Hugh Freeze didn't want to go spend $1 million on a quarterback. So he put all of his eggs in the Peyton Thorne basket. This is a team that spent money in the transfer portal. I think their schedule is very manageable. They should be at least 8-4, 9-3. The other coach I want to throw out here before we move on real quickly, Dave Aranda at Baylor. And the reason I mention him is because of Neil Brown a year ago went 9-4, ended the season on a high note in West Virginia. This offseason he was fired. What are we going to get from Dave Aranda? Guy was going into the hot seat last season. Sawyer Robertson balls on out. They have a very good rapport with their community and with their boosters. They made it clear they're buying talent. They have shirts that say, we spent NIL money. They want to get the right coach in there. I think Dave Aranda's facing a little bit of pressure to go ahead and prove that, hey, I'm the right guy in Waco.
Couple other just very quick thoughts before we move on to the wild card. Every coach is under pressure. I think Napier's under some pressure. I know they had a nice finish to last year, but at the end of the day, his record is 19-19. Now, I think that 7-5 gets him another year, even though that might be somewhat disappointing to their fans. 6-6 is a question mark, kind of like Cole mentioned with Venables. If it's 6-6, but you're getting blown out by Texas and LSU and Georgia, then maybe that looks a little bit different. Norvell under more pressure this year, obviously going 2-10 last year, but now with the ACC's unequal revenue sharing, which we haven't really talked about that buyout might not be as big of a problem if you're making an additional, it's a 5-year rolling average. So even if Florida State goes 4-8 again this year, they're still going to be at the top 3 of the ACC in viewership. They also welcome Bama to town. They also play Florida. They also play Clemson. They also play Miami. They're going to get viewership numbers this year. And so even if they go 4-8, they're still going to be one of the most viewed teams in the ACC like they were last year, number 4 overall with a 2-10 record. Norvell's buyout is not as big of a problem if you're making an additional $15 million from the ACC. And so I think that's one that there's a lot of pressure on too. Certainly, kind of covering them and looking at them pretty closely. That pressure is ratcheted way up on him now that Florida State probably will have extra cash to potentially buy a coach out. Thank you for watching this episode of The Power 2. This was part of a live show that you can get right now by clicking the link on the screen. We appreciate you guys for tuning in. Make sure you're subscribed to College Football Addiction so you don't miss any of The Power 2.